Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you the news and views we hope are relevant to you. Well, in today's show, the plot thickens. We were mocked by our critics for quoting the Washington Post over India's involvement in Nijjar's killing. Well, it turns out Canada's intelligence service has just admitted it did indeed feed key information to that very same publication to ensure it reached a wide audience in retaliation for India's arrogant misinformation campaign. So, yes indeed, we are bringing you the truth. It's also a key week of anniversaries this week, including a highly revered Shaheed, the Sikh genocide and Jaggi Singh Johal's arbitrary detention. And India is still at it, as the FBI warns a Sikh event in California this weekend it's about to be targeted with Indian violence. And to follow on from yesterday's discussion about drugs, alcohol and Sikhi, we take a deeper dive into how these drugs are being weaponised in a modern world. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Quick apology yesterday. I might have said Ashdeep Bains instead of Arshdeep Bains, Vancouver Canuck, who got his first NHL goal. So my apologies if that was the fact, but I didn't go back and double check. I was just worried about that.
Indeed, and mistakes and all, James and I together will hopefully be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll be taking a look at loads of your great comments, which have been filling up below our videos. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, let's get the show on the road. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go through it fairly quickly for the content that we have. But first of all, we're going to take a look at the weaponization of drugs and alcohol and addiction overall. Not only how it's impacting around the global scale, but we'll also look at it a bit closer in terms of the Punjab issue and problem that's happening. But let's start first by taking a look at a quick video that was produced by Yale Medicine and Yale University that explains how addiction impacts the human brain. Because I think that's important to understand when you're looking at a lot of people that misunderstand how it works, and they think that it's an option for people to just walk away easily from. And unfortunately, that's not the case. So let's take a first quick look at how addiction impacts the human brain.
Addiction is defined as not having control over doing, taking, using something to the point where it could be harmful to you. Previous to understanding the science, it was thought that addiction resulted from a lack of willpower and was a moral failing. But we now know that addiction is a physiological disease. It changes the brain structure in ways that can alter the way it works and process information. To understand how that happens, we start by thinking about reward and the brain's natural reward system. The reward pathway's primary function is to reinforce sets of behaviors. Evolutionarily, it began as a way to indicate to us that actions that help us survive are good and we should keep doing them. This is mediated through a chemical called dopamine. Following an appropriate behavior, the reward pathway releases a small burst of dopamine. That burst of dopamine is a satisfying jolt, encouraging you to repeat the same action in the future. Dopamine will in turn also act on areas responsible for memory and movement, which helps us automatically build up memories for what is good for survival. The problem is that addictive substances hijack our natural reward system. Every substance has slightly different actions on the brain, but one thing all addictive drugs have in common is that they produce a pleasurable surge of dopamine. Addictive drugs all cause dopamine to flood the reward pathway 10 times higher than a natural reward would. Over chronic use, nothing else natural is quite as rewarding. In fact, as substance use increases, the circuits adapt and reduce their sensitivity to dopamine, a phenomenon known as tolerance. For example, let's say a person takes cocaine for the first time. The reward system receives a huge burst of dopamine. But as the person takes more frequently, cocaine will be overstimulating the brain with dopamine. This will cause the brain to adapt to these chronically high levels of dopamine. To compensate and adapt to this new normal, the brain reduces the number of dopamine receptors available in the reward system and releases less dopamine. As a result, that person will feel the need to increase the amount of drug they take so that they can reach the level of high that they're used to. But it's not just the reward system that's affected by this tolerance, since dopamine is also involved in other brain mechanisms. Other brain regions involving decision-making, memory, and judgment also get physically disrupted as a result. The overall effect is to have drug-seeking behavior driven by habit rather than conscious thought, like a reflex instead of a choice. This biological basis helps to explain why addiction really is a brain disease, not a matter of willpower. The stigma that accompanies addiction only makes seeking treatment more difficult.
So as you can see, it's quite complex in how the different narcotics or even alcohol, tobacco, and other substances have an impact directly on the brain and its function. And, another example of this is if you are out with people who are drinking and they're smokers, they tend to smoke more when they're drinking. And that's because alcohol is a depressant, whereas the tobacco is a stimulant. So they, again, counteract each other in the brain and how the systems work. So it's very complex in the different types of chemicals that you introduce to your system and to your brain. Now, we see a lot of different drugs flooding in through the borders, not only in Canada, the United States, or the UK, but it's flooding into regions like India through Pakistan and other areas. And this is not only to do with the trying to feed the addictions and to make money from it in terms of the cartels and the international drug gangs and so forth. But it's also a way of foreign governments or other individuals who want to place harm on a certain group of people or on a certain community and such. And this is to flood the market with cheap drugs, which we're seeing now in fentanyl and other type things such as K2. And for foreign governments or for terror groups not that want to impact a nation, this is easily done by saturating, again, with low-cost product that's going to have a more immediate tolerance reduction. And as I used fentanyl as an example, it was also brought forward by the pharmaceutical industries who are looking to make money. Now, this is a very big concern because of the fact that they have walked away in, whether it is the Sackler family or others, have just walked away clean and free, essentially, from what's going on. They have been facing civil litigation. But in a bigger concern is that the illicit drug market, it's not as easy to trace where the drugs and the other things are coming from, as well as media impact on trying to convince youth and young adults that if they want to be cool, if they want to be accepted, that they want to use alcohol, tobacco, and other more harmful drugs. And this is, again, where other countries or terror groups can really take advantage of bringing down a society, because it has far-reaching implications, not only on the individuals who are addicted and their direct families, but it also has a huge impact on reduction of the of business, of finance, and such when it comes to the actual productivity of a nation. It impacts law enforcement as well as border patrols who could be spending that time watching for international risks, such as we're seeing with foreign interference and transnational repression. Instead, they're focused on trying to deal with the narcotics that are flooding the streets. And then when you look at the medical areas, they're spending money on research and time where these valuable researchers and tools could be utilized to look at the prevention of biological or chemical warfare down the road. Instead, they're dealing with addiction. And that in itself is a type of chemical warfare that's a lot harder to track because there's not as much concern when it comes to people who are addicted. And again, that's due to a lack of information. Now let's take a closer look at the Punjab region, because there is a great report by the Journal of Family Medicine and Primary Care that is available, and it is very telling about the influx of addiction within that region. And this covers all areas. So some of it may be a bit overstated in terms of the numbers, because they do look at current alcohol and tobacco as well as other drug use. As when they say drug use, it could be anybody who has taken part in the study has used at least once in the last year. So it doesn't factor in if those individuals have just used it once and then never touched it again within that year, or ever since. So again, the numbers could be off by, they estimated about 10% plus or minus. So just so you understand how that works in terms of the numbers in the study. And I'm not going to cover it all, but I'm just going to cover a few important areas of the study. And if you are interested, it is available at the Yale website as well. And I'm just going to pause on this screen because you can scan this QR code with your phone to pull up the full study if you are interested in that. And again, this particular study deals with the numbers and the impacts in the region of Punjab. So that's very important that way. Now, what they are looking at is that the drug use is a global phenomenon affecting most every country, and its extent and characteristics differ from region to region. India is caught up in this vicious cycle of drug abuse, and the number of drug addicts are increasing day by day. The bane of drug abuse in Punjab has acquired the proportions of a pestilence that has shaken the entire society in the state. And there are several reasons for that. And this is a raging epidemic, but especially impacting the younger community and the younger crowd, so to speak. The prevalence among substance abuse among the study group was 65.5%, and most common substance abused was alcohol at 41.8%, followed by tobacco at 21.3%. A high prevalence of heroin abusers was noted among the study at 20.8%, and the prevalence of non-alcohol and non-tobacco substance abuse was 34.8%. Again, just throwing numbers out there that you may want to look at the study closer, but again, it's got a plus minus of about 10% on it. And this is mostly associated with males, as well as people with that are illiterate and less educated. And for long term, that really plays into the role as well for those above 30 years old who are still fighting with addiction. Now, the problem of drug abuse in youth of Punjab is a matter of serious concern, as every third person is hooked to drugs other than alcohol and tobacco. The striking observations were the high prevalence of heroin and intravenous drug abuse. Now, with the cost of such drugs, again, it's being brought into Punjab to be spread out throughout India. So it's a gateway there. And of course, the prices tend to get higher as it's distributed throughout the country. But in Punjab, they want to really impact the community, not only from a nefarious point, whether it's government or other agencies trying to get the Punjab youth and the Sikhs into the drugs to try to eliminate people, but also because of the fact that they can bring money in. And that is whether it's in Pakistan, in China, in Russia, or anywhere else, the drug cartels in Mexico or even further south bring that in to raise money to not only supply weapons and such for their civil unrest, but also international drug cartels and groups utilize it to fund terror and other opportunities like that. So I'm going to just scroll down the screen so you can kind of pause and read it, because we do have limited time on this show, or we could do a lot longer on it. But again, when you look at those numbers in Punjab, it's quite alarming. And one of the things that people really have to look at as well is the impact of how recovery works. Now, a lot of areas, I'm going to show some pictures on the screen, and these are images that are from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I do not have related images when it comes to Punjab, but I just want to show an example of how the failure to give long-term support for recovery happens. And with that, the people who are addicted, especially the younger generation, when they are dealing with the addiction issues and they do finally reach out to get help and to get through detoxification and recovery, they are at a very low income threshold. And that's going to be very similar to other places around the world because they are not working. They've been in treatment and out of the society for a while. Now, this group of images that you're looking at is what we call an SRO, or single room occupancy in Vancouver, British Columbia. This is supposed to be a place where addicts can recover. Unfortunately, they do house active addicts in the same locations where people are placed after recovery because of the major housing shortage in British Columbia, and the price of homes is just astronomical and out of reach for most people coming out of these facilities. So as you can see in this building, this is right in between several of the rooms that are being utilized by individuals, whether addicted or trying to recover. And you can see this is just in the middle of the floor. There's no door on this room or this unit, and it's just filled with garbage. There's rats, there's cockroaches, there's, used personal items. I won't get into detail on that because it just is disgusting. Here you can see there's almost a courtyard there where the windows lead to. And down here you cannot really see from this image, but there are just piles of needles, used syringes, personal cleaning items, personal care items, gloves, you name it, it's all down there. Here they've got cat litter boxes in the hall, and you can't really see here, but there are blood spots on the hallway floors. People taking intravenous drugs right in the hallways and such. You've got, the litter box is actually filled with cigarette butts and needles and other things. Here you can see that the floors have blood on them, and you can see down at the bottom of that image, at the bottom of the stairs, there's a used syringe. So, I mean, when you have people who have gone through recovery and trying to get their life back in order, and you put them back in this environment, of course, you're not setting them up for long-term success. Here they have to step over people who have taken drugs and are literally on the nod, sitting outside the doors on the sidewalks. And people wonder why it is that they don't want to go into the shelters, why there are so many people on the streets living in tents and refusing the shelters. And that is a big reason why, because it is just disgusting and it is not conducive to long-term recovery for those who are really struggling and trying to make something better, Angus.
Yeah, it's we talked at great length about the evils of drugs, and it is when you see it in detail and its impact, just purely from an academic study, it's quite it's not just alarming. It just proves in black and white just the evils of how powerful they can be in bringing down whole social or segments of society. It's astonishing. I think one of the interesting things I picked out from that study in the Punjab is the causes of and the reasons why, particularly the young, are seduced into these into using drugs, especially drugs as opposed to alcohol. And it cites three particular causes. Firstly, changing cultural values, increasing economic stress, and dwindling supporting bonds. Now, these are quite interesting because these actually speak an awful lot in those very academic terms. It actually illustrates a lot of what is going on in the Punjab deliberately. I would say, encouraged by New Delhi. And I'll start with changing cultural values. Now, there's a lot of contributory factors to why culture is changing in the Punjab. You know, the world is modernising, there's the influence of media, social media, etc. But clearly there is an agenda coming, I would say, deliberately from New Delhi and central governments in India to try and change the culture of Punjab. It's trying to reduce the influence of Sikhi in the Punjab. It is trying to suppress, to oppress and bury all the whole philosophy and goodness that Sikhi brings to society, the Punjab. So that is one of the key factors. So there's this changing cultural values. Increasing economic stress. Now, we've talked regularly about how the farmers are being impacted, how they're being attacked by actual government policy, by incompetence or deliberate mismanagement by government and state level governance. So again, we've got this huge economic stress. So there's less jobs, there's less work around, people are poorer, people have less money in their pockets. So of course they start turning to alternatives, which includes drugs. And finally, dwindling supporting bonds. Now, this is an interesting one because of course those supporting bonds include the family, it includes the Gurdwara. So if central government can start damaging and even destroying those supporting bonds, it's destroying the concept of family, again part of that cultural change, but it is trying to break these family bonds, it's trying to break the bonds with Gurdwaras. Remember, we often talk about the infiltration of the Gurdwaras by, let's say, the RSS indirectly, but certainly RSS sympathetic individuals who are taking control of these Sikh organisations across the Punjab. They are breaking the bonds between the Sikh community and the central areas, the hubs of society like the Gurdwaras. And those bonds are breaking down. It's those bonds traditionally that keep the youth strong, that keep them on the good path, that keep them on the path of Sikhi and away from drugs. But once those bonds start breaking down, then of course the young are then going to be more tempted and seduced into the bad path of drugs. So, and of course the impact of this, as we've talked about regularly, the impact is there to see, and we see it across the West, but of course we're now seeing it in the Punjab to an increasing extent. And it's interesting, if you look at the right wing, the Hindutva social media, they're often peddling lots of videos and pictures and stories about how law and order is breaking down in the Punjab. It's all over social media, all over Twitter or X. And they are showing videos of drug addicts causing all sorts of problems and the increase in crime, the violence, again, driven by drugs. It's a breakdown of law and order. It's a breakdown it's essentially a social breakdown. And that's what I think New Delhi are trying to create in Punjab. They're kind of trying to break down society. They're trying to break down the structure of society and the structure of society that's been built so positively by the Sikh community. And the only way to destroy that and therefore destroy the cultural identity from within, it's this acid attack. It's dissolving from within the cultural identity of the Sikh community. And this is what drugs do. It's attacking it from the bottom upwards. It's hitting the youth, who in turn are resorting to violence to feed this drug habit, and that in turn is breaking down law and order, which in turn gives New Delhi the ammunition to criticise the state of the Punjab, to take more control of it, to start justifiably putting their own people in place and saying, well, you can't look after yourselves, we have to take greater control of it, as J&K has ably demonstrated on a regular basis. So unfortunately, I think, we've often talked, is it incompetence? Is it deliberate mismanagement? And clearly, I think the whole drug problem is, as we have said on many occasions, and as we have speculated on many occasions, it's very likely drugs are very, very deliberately being poured into the Punjab by malign forces. And I think we can all guess who those malign forces are, to deliberately destroy the cultural identity of the Punjab. It's trying to damage, destroy, and completely rid India of the khalistan problem. Unfortunately for the Punjab, it's a very effective weapon. It's working, and it's incumbent on the people of the Punjab to do their absolute best to drive this scourge out, to try and get the young back into Sikhi, the ethos and philosophy of Sikhi, which banishes these dreadful drugs. And I think that the fight has to come from all angles. It has to come obviously from education and awareness. It has to come on the streets. It has to come at grassroots level. It has to come even, for example, when we reported Punjab Singh's wonderful email that he sent in yesterday that we reported on. He suggested overnight, actually by email again, why don't we continue to look at the media, the mainstream media, and if we see film directors and producers producing material that includes drug usage or alcohol usage, call it out. Put in our comments sections. If you see a film where you see young Sikhs, or Sikhs of any age actually, using alcohol, particularly drugs, put it in our comments section. Let's highlight, let's point the finger at the filmmakers doing this. Let's make it become intolerable. Let's make it become a stain if you highlight things like this. If you put into your productions Sikhs using drugs, let's point that finger of guilt at them and let's name and shame them. There's no problem in doing that. So James, I think it's a multilateral approach, but the problem has clearly been identified. It's how now we tackle it. Unfortunately, local government and state governments in India are not going to do anything about it, or deliberately it's their hands off. Yeah, let's let it happen because it's serving their purpose. Unfortunately, it's going to have to come from the Sikh community itself. We are going to have to fight back. Amit Singh has done his best. Well done to him. Look where he is now. I think that in itself is evidence of where the probable source of the drugs is coming from, because Amit Singh has tried to stand up to it, as have many others, and found themselves falling foul of the police and ended up being tortured. So yeah, it's a bit of a battle, and that battleground, unfortunately, James, is the Punjab.
Absolutely. And other things, I mean, parents that are struggling to make ends meet, the youth see the drug dealers out there, with handfuls of money, lots of bling and nice cars, beautiful women around them. And they think, why should I go to school like my parents for, 4 years, for 8 years, for 12 years, whatever the case is, when I can just go out and peddle drugs and have the protection of a gang that's, they don't see the long-term impacts, Angus. They don't see the long-term ramifications. And the fact that a lot of those gangsters and dealers are going to be either dead or in jail for life, 5 years down the road. And they don't see that. And that's a big part of the media, as you touched on, is that they're glorifying it in so many ways, but not showing a realistic, outcome to these individuals. And then when you hit certain communities as well, the lack of extracurricular activities and organized sport, youth who have more activities and less time on their hands definitely have a better chance to avoid that. So it's a very complex issue. It's a very tough issue to deal with. And for countries and terror groups that are using it to weaponize addiction, of course, they are seeing it as a win-win, because there's very little tracking, as there would be with other biological or chemical weapons that, if they set them free in communities. So, but with that, let's move on, Angus, because we are going to run short of time. We're extra long on the show again tonight. And let's take a look at some more news coming out from the Foreign Interference Commission in Canada and the ongoing saga between Canada and India, with the media just going back and forth. But really, the Western media has picked up and actually run with the fact that India is very much involved in foreign interference. Now, it came out that the Home Minister, Amit Shah, greenlit attacks. And this is coming straight from Canadian officials. It was also confirmed in the Washington Post story. And again, that was confirmed by Canadian officials, although they've been clear to state, both Canadian officials and the Washington Post, that this also came from other sources other than the meeting that they had with Canadian intelligence and Canadian ministers. But with that regard, the Canadian government did confirm that they met with the Washington Post as part of a very strategic and intentional move to meet with an international, well-reputed, well-organized media outlet. They knew that that could get the story out to an international audience, but also by showing non-bias of a Canadian media industry or outlet. So there were many factors that played into the reason why the Canadian government and the Canadian ministers chose to meet with and to confirm information with the Washington Post, it was not just out of happenstance. It was not out of trying to disrespect any Canadian news agency, but they really wanted to reach out and get that global reach and that global story out there to really drive home the impact and the truth behind what's going on. So as we continue with that, we can take a look at the Washington Post is still continuing on with various stories and information, but here it very much shows the cat with the canary, you could say, Angus, that there is just ongoing evidence that continues to come out. And here we see the post that was made online by another individual. And with that said, Ian Marlow, although he misspelled Canadian's deputy foreign minister, but they confirm again that Amit Shah, who is Narendra Modi's right-hand man, was very much authorizing the wave of violence across Canada that included extortion and homicides, among other things that were going on. So let's take a look at a couple of the key informations that came out. And this is from the Canadian Parliament National Security hearing on India. And if you're interested in watching the full episode or the full day's events, you can do so on CPAC website, and there you can find all of the videos. But Conservative MP Dancho asked, why did the Canadian intelligence apparatus go to the Washington Post with the story implicating Modi's inner circle in the killing of Canadians without informing the Canadian public first? And that's something that the Canadian media is a little upset about, but they have to understand that there was a strategy behind it. And again, the panel response was that the Washington Post had prior intelligence implicating Amit Shah in the killing, likely sourced from U.S. intelligence, potentially using signal intelligence led by the National Security Agency. Canadian officials were approached by the Post to confirm details, placing Canada in a position to either verify or stay silent on crucial information. So, of course, they decided that it was best to meet it head on and to admit that, yes, that is the case and that person was definitely involved. Now, let's go to the Singapore meeting that they addressed with Indian officials of October the 12th. Canadian officials confronted Indian representatives in Singapore with concrete evidence. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, responded that India would categorically deny any connection to Nijjar's murder or any violence in Canada, irrespective of the evidence presented. And again, Canada has presented irrefutable evidence. Persistent denials by India on October the 13th. The day after the Singapore meeting, Indian officials continued to push their narrative in the media, which Canada believes to be deliberate misinformation. And it should be noted that in today's statements or yesterday's statements that were made, there was on the October 12th meeting an agreement to reconvene on the 14th of October. Now, they also had an agreement that nobody would speak to the media, the meeting would be kept confidential, and no information would be leaked at all, so that they could pick up the integrity of the meeting and hopefully find some way to move forward. But instead, India chose to breach that agreement and start spreading misinformation and lies throughout the India propaganda machine. So they also said that there were missed meetings that on multiple occasions, and that was a part of going public on October the 14th. So they stated Canada was repeatedly let down by the Indian government from August 2023 through October 14th, 2024. This pattern of missed communications led Canada to proceed with a plan to release the intelligence publicly after waiting in vain for a scheduled call with India on the morning of October 14th. With no follow-up from India, Canada decided to make the matter public, and that was really, it was about national security and the safety of all Canadians that they decided to take this extraordinary step. Now, the strategic choice of the Washington Post we've already covered, but their direct response was that Canada opted for the Washington Post to maximize international visibility, knowing the Post's prior in-depth coverage of Sikh activists Hardeep Singh Nijjar and Gurpatwant Singh Panun. This choice ensured the gravity of Canada's concerns reached the global stage, emphasizing Canada's need for transparency given India's repeated delays and denials. Now, they had other international meetings set up where Indian officials just failed to arrive. They didn't show up at all. There were meetings set up in Washington, in Dubai, all over the world, and India just did not want to take part in these conversations and to deal with it. And in closing to that, Angus, I'm just going to play a clip from Mr. Greer, who also addressed the panel today on behalf of Sikhs across Canada, and really, I think, will shed, or he shared some appreciation for all of the work and law enforcement agencies that are involved in this, given that he, as he states it, Sikhs have been knowing this has been going on for years, and now this adds credibility to their concerns and the information that they've brought up in the past. So I'm just going to play this quick video. And
our CMP announced that they had evidence that agents of the government of India are actively involved in a network of criminal activity here in Canada that includes homicide, extortion, organized crime, and interference in our democratic process. It's a network of crime that could potentially mean the involvement of some of India's highest-ranking diplomats and politicians. First of all, I'd like to just deeply thank the law enforcement agencies for your work, for uncovering this, for taking the action to protect Canadians. And as I say this, I have a deep recognition that I don't know if you folks quite know what you've done. For many Canadians of Sikh heritage, your words have confirmed what they already knew and felt. For decades in gurdwaras, in homes, behind closed doors, Sikhs knew that they were being watched, that they were being monitored, that we were being targeted. And what you've done is legitimize their concerns with the evidence and investigation that you've engaged in. Every time that there's new information that comes out or an announcement that happens, I'm asked by my colleagues, by my family, by members of the community, how are you and how is the overall community doing? And what I can say is that there's always a deep sigh of relief that their plight is not being ignored, and in fact that it's being heard and it's being acted upon. I think all Canadians can appreciate that the potential link of the murder of a Sikh and other crimes in Canada by the Indian state, it strikes at the very heart of the security that a lot of Sikhs and other communities come to Canada to find. And this is why I think your work is so critical. And I deeply thank you for that work. Ms. Drouin, my first question is for you. A criminal that is jailed in a foreign jail in India that acts on behest of the Indian government for basic immunity to carry out his operations. This is quite literally the plot of several Bollywood movies that I've watched growing up, and it's funny to see that the Indian government takes its hints from Bollywood. My question to you is, this is an individual that's being kept in an Indian jail. There's potential involvement of Indian ministers and diplomats. How far does our jurisdiction reach? What action can be taken against a Lawrence Bishnoi type figure if the evidence actually shows that there's a connection all the way through?
You want to have a crack at this? Your question is a very interesting one in terms of the jurisdiction we may have when it comes to law enforcement elsewhere in the world. And this is why, as I presented in my opening remarks, the cooperation mechanism and for India to take accountability and to direct Bishnoi to stop its illegal criminal activities in Canada was essential. And this is why also we wanted to use all the tools available to us, including diplomatic tools. But maybe, Commissioner, you want to add to that?
I could probably add some to that, and I just want to mention that we still have significant ongoing files right now. So to your question, if the evidence supports the involvement of an individual overseas, there's always that possibility to lay charges on Canadian soil. Then you get into the extradition process and whatnot, and if the individual's locked up for the next, I don't know how long he's locked up, that could be challenging, but doesn't mean that we have to recuse ourselves from laying any criminal charges against the individual.
Great. So maybe I can finish the plot line for that movie that the Indian government seems to be wanting to make. When that eventual connection is made between government officials that are using criminals to carry out their targeted hits, their actions that they want to carry out, they usually paint that individual as a rogue agent. And so I assume eventually that is the information that's going to come out when this investigation comes out. My other question is, we know that the Conservative Party leader has engaged in willful blindness. We know that the Conservative Party has said that their leader could be briefed via a TRM, a threat reduction measure. Are you considering briefing him in that way? And could you explain the limitations of a TRM and compared to the amount of information that he could receive if he received top secret security clearance?
Thank you. I'll start and I will go to Director to complete. So in terms of sharing information with different parties, the easiest way for sure is to be able to have a top secret conversation with leaders. That can help us in terms of managing the caucus if needs be, and it is also the simplest way. A threat reduction measure is a mechanism by which some information can be revealed, the essential and necessary information in order to manage the threat. I will let the Director continue, but the TRM is not an equivalent of disclosing TS information to a clear individual.
Thank you, Madam. I can confirm what Natalie has said. Certainly, TRM requires specific legal thresholds and allows us to provide a subset of information, and we will evaluate whether that's something that we can do. And as we move ahead, without a security clearance at this point, CSIS can't provide a more fulsome brief on a broader set of topics.
C'est maintenant Madame Michaud.
Now, Ms. Michaud, 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So a couple of points there, in addition to obviously what we take away from that, was that the RCMP did state that there are significant ongoing files. That means that there are some still major investigations that are coming up from this information and maybe not even associated with Hardeep Singh Nijjar and such, that are totally separate in themselves, both on a national security level, but also in homicides and other investigations that are taking place. The other note of interest here was the questions about Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, and the fact that even though he can get certain information, he is not allowed to get the top secret information that could really explain to him the threats at the full scale against Canadians when it comes to the India government or any other government for that fact. And as long as he fails to get his top security clearance and refuses that, he really doesn't show the concern that someone who wants to be Prime Minister should have for the national security of our country and the safety of every person on Canadian soil. So that to me is also very telling and very concerning. Angus?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, obviously. I mean, this is pretty explosive stuff that's come out overnight. And I think just even watching that video, I think it's just, if you look at the bigger picture here, we're actually now debating in public the use of Lawrence Bishnoi as a proxy killer by the Indian government. This is actually being discussed by the RCMP, by the highest levels of government in a public forum, in a public inquiry that is broadcast essentially to the world. That is where India is at. And that is actually in itself just speaking so much about what a mess India is in now. That, it's been broadcast around the world that high-level officials in Canada are now discussing how the Indian government have been using hired killers and a hired criminal gang to go out and kill citizens of a foreign nation on their sovereign territory. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And I think, I mean, the real thing here, again, if we just take several steps back here, As we've said, we speculated from the very beginning that it's most likely that this plot to kill Nijjar, this plot after Weaponising Singh Panoon, potentially after Singh Kanda, and many others around the world, that this plot does go all the way up to the very top in India. We've talked about how the Department of Justice in the US collared Nikhil Gupta, and he in turn went back to Vikram Yadav. He reported back to Vikram Yadav, who in turn is likely reported to Samant Goel, the head of RAW at the time, who in turn likewise would have been dealing with on a daily basis Ajit Doval, the National Security Advisor, the right-hand man of Narendra Modi. We're also now implicating Amit Shah. So Amit Shah, the Home Minister in India, a high level, one of the most senior government ministers in India, has now been implicated in the same plot. We speculated all along that it's likely it goes all the way up to Narendra Modi. All the evidence is falling into place. India, and again, this shows the immaturity and the inexperience of India as a nation. And this is a country trying to, or demanding a place at the top table. This is a country that has been fingered directly. The finger of guilt is being pointed at the Indian government itself, saying, we've got the evidence, we've caught you red-handed at some pretty appalling illegal activity across the West and indeed Pakistan, as it turns out. And what's India's reaction to this? Oh, well, Ajit Doval, who met with the officials, has said, we'll deny everything. I mean, it's belligerence, it's arrogance, it's actually the actions of a country deeply inexperienced in global affairs. They are showing that this is not how you behave. Russia have been up to activities like this. China have been up to activities like this for years. They know how to play the game. The game is played by certain rules. India is yet to learn those rules. And unfortunately for India, it's going to get a very, very large slap across the face by the rest of the world and saying, you just can't behave like this. And when we catch you, you then have to react accordingly. You're going to have to learn the lesson. This is the teenage child now trying to play in the adults' playroom, and is just about to get a very sharp slap around the chops and said, no, you don't behave like this when you play with us, you behave like an adult. And unfortunately, this is going to be a life lesson for India. And I think the credibility of India now is shot to pieces. And of course, the Indian media machine is into overdrive. They're churning out the pro-Modi propaganda, the anti-Canada propaganda by the hourful. Every hour, the Indian media are pouring out anti-Canada stories and pro-Modi stories. And all it's doing is it's making it look like a fool. India is standing up. It's becoming the global joker. It's being laughed at by the West at the moment because it's being caught out and it's trying to defend itself by this childish reaction of churning out, you're all talking nonsense. No, we're not guilty. And here's the let's start attacking Trudeau, etc. And it's all for Trudeau's votes. Sorry, India, you're beyond that now, and you've been caught red-handed. The government itself is now implicated. This is going to set India back by decades, I would say, on the international stage. It's a massive strategic error, and they're just compounding their mistakes day after day, not just with denials, but this pathetic media onslaught against the West now. And trying to prop Modi's regime up, trying to defend Modi and his government's actions. It's all just looking a little bit laughable, a little bit silly, in my opinion, James. It's blown up in the faces.
Absolutely, Angus, and it's definitely not going away anytime soon.
Indeed. So, and actually, I'm going to go on to my first story now, and this again is just compounding India's stupidity. Because now the FBI have reported that in California, the Sikh community in California, who have actually been targeted on several occasions by India, they've been planning a Nagar Kirtan this weekend. That's a religious procession. And it's expected to attract thousands in the city of Yuba in California. The FBI has warned that it has been marked for what they call potential violence due to targeting by what they describe as Indian organised crime. Now, we do know that back in August, Khalistan activist Satinder Pal Singh Raju survived an assassination attempt near San Francisco, which was indeed linked to the Indian state. And now Raju, of course, is affiliated with Weaponising Singh Panoon. Both of them are involved in that Khalistan referendum being rolled out by Sikhs for Justice across the world. Now, it was Baz News itself, the news outlet Baz, that's revealed this FBI warning. And they've said also that in recent years there have been random incidents reported at some more public Sikh gatherings across California. And it's all forming part of this transnational repression that's been reported regularly. Now, Baz actually said on their website, sorry, not on their website, on Twitter, they broke this news, saying that a leaked FBI situational information report warned of an Indian organised crime group planning a shooting at the Yuba City Nagar Kirtan. Now, the FBI notified multiple Gurdwaras across California and local police as well. And in Canada, it's been found by authorities that one goal of the Indian government organised crime nexus is to destabilise the Sikh community and falsely accuse and malign them as prone to inter-gang violence. So again, what they're doing is that these attacks are deliberately labelled as inter-gang violence, so that what they're trying to do is undermine the whole Sikh community's reputation by saying, well, they're involved in gang violence because their events keep being targeted by gang violence. So again, it's all part of this overall strategy. Now, this FBI report, the situational information report, has been put into the public domain. It makes quite scary reading. It reads as follows. As of October 2024, Indian organised crime groups were possibly planning a shooting at the upcoming Sikh festival in Yuba City between November the 1st and 3rd. The shooting was believed to not likely happen inside the fairgrounds, but possibly occur in the parking lot or on the route to the festival. Several of these groups are coming from the US and Canada. A method to conceal firearms at the festival would be to load a car with weapons 1 or 2 days before, park the car in a nearby parking lot or area near the festival grounds, so individuals didn't have to carry the weapons into the festival in case law enforcement stopped them. The plan was to go back to the car and retrieve the weapons if needed. And the FBI themselves issued a statement, public statement, saying the FBI routinely receives and shares information with local, state and federal law enforcement partners to assist in protecting the communities. FBI is aware of potential threats of violence involving rival gangs in and around the vicinity of the Sikh parade in Yuba from November the 1st to the 3rd. Although these threats are unverified, we will continue to work closely with our partners to ensure the safety of the community at the event. Encourage members of the public to remain vigilant. So what we're seeing here, James, India are still at it. They've been caught red-handed in the murder of Nijjar, in the assassination plot to murder Gurpatwant Singh Panoon. The Indian government, Narendra Modi, Amit Shah, Ajit Doval, all these people are implicated, and here they are still at it. We've been talking about how the Lawrence Bishnoi gang are now publicly named in high-level government inquiries of being involved as proxy killers for hire. And yet, in Yuba City this weekend, we do know that more proxy gang members are being paid by the Indian government to cause more violence against the Sikh community. What are they doing? Are they really that stupid, James?
I would hate to say it, but yes, I do believe they are. And also of a note, if you look at the screen there for our viewers, there is the contact information for the FBI. If you have any tips or any information that you think should be passed on, if you question yourself about whether or not it should be passed on, then just do it anyway. Let them figure out whether or not it is important enough to follow up on. So again, the information's on your screen there that Angus is sharing.
So, I shake my head in disbelief. India are just digging themselves deeper and deeper into a very big dark hole. And it's just very concerning for India as a nation. What it's doing, though, is it's ensuring, contrast India's behaviour with the behaviour of the global Sikh community. And it's very clear now what the global community, how they're going to make up their minds, who is the villain in this story and who is the community that stood up for injustice and the truth. And unfortunately now for India, Khalistan is an inevitability because the whole Khalistan movement has been supported by the Sikh community globally, and again, it can only happen with global support. Global support is falling away from India. It doesn't matter what India says now. They've been caught red-handed. It's the Khalistan movement that is now being stood up as the beacon of truth and justice and the rule of law and democracy. So it's only inevitability. So I'm going to rush on now to my second story because we're well behind time. And this week, as I said in the introduction, this week is a week of lots of very important and significant anniversaries. On Monday, in 5 days' time, Jaggi Singh Johal will have been arbitrarily detained by India for 7 years. 7 years Jaggi Singh Johal has remained behind bars, still awaiting justice, still awaiting the true rule of law. He's been charged under 9 counts, and yet we're waiting for any legal process for him to prove his innocence. It's an astounding affront to democracy. It's an affront to the rule of law, and it just shows India for what it is. It is a rogue nation that is out of control. So Monday, a big anniversary, and we will continue to follow Jaggi's story and highlight that injustice and highlight the inaction of the British government, who still remain deafeningly silent about that matter. Now, 31st of October, tomorrow, is a very, very big day, a very big anniversary. 40 years to the day, the assassination of Indira Gandhi. She was killed, shot by 2 Shaheeds, Beant Singh, Satwant Singh. Beant Singh was martyred on the very day that Indira Gandhi, he was shot shortly after assassinating Indira Gandhi. And Satwant Singh was finally hanged in India for his part in the assassination of Indira Gandhi on the 6th of January 1989. And he likewise was martyred. These 2 gentlemen were martyred for a very good reason, because as we reported in a recent podcast, Operation Shanti. Now, many people believe that Indira Gandhi was assassinated for her part of Operation Blue Star, this dreadful attack on the Golden Temple in 1984, June 1984. In fact, evidence has emerged since, and mounting evidence has shown that Indira Gandhi was plotting something even more outrageous and evil, Operation Shanti. She was due to launch Operation Shanti in the early days of November 1984. This operation, it was designed to, under the claims that Pakistan was planning to invade India across the Punjab border, and that skirmishes were happening, that the Pakistan army were starting to attack Indian elements in the Punjab border. So as a result, in retaliation for that, Indira Gandhi was going to order the Indian army to mobilise the Punjab and start firebombing the villages across the Punjab, publicly saying we're fighting back against Pakistani insurgency, and that the Sikh community are rising up in support of Pakistan. So as a result, we're going to start firebombing and razing Sikh villages to the ground, because they are allegedly standing up with Pakistan to attack India. This is a completely false flag operation. It was designed essentially to genocide the whole Sikh community in the Punjab area. So Operation Shanti was designed to murder hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Sikhs in November 1984. As a result, Beant Singh and Satwant Singh heard of this. They knew of this. Information was leaked of this operation that was planned. They realised to stop this mass murder of Sikhs in the Punjab, they had to stop it. The only way to stop it was to kill Indira Gandhi. That was Operation Shanti. More details in one of my past podcasts. Please look out for that. So, as I said, 1984, October the 31st, Indira Gandhi was assassinated. Beant Singh was martyred immediately afterwards, shortly followed by Satwant Singh a few years later. And so 40 years to the day, October the 31st, over the following days in 1984, the dreadful Sikh genocide unfolded. This was when the Congress Party, high-level government officials in the Congress Party, encouraged publicly the Hindu population to rise up against the Sikh community across the Punjab and across India, and go out and kill Sikhs wherever you find them, men, women and children. Men, women and children were not just murdered, they were tortured, they were dragged out of their homes, tyres were put round them and they were set alight. Children were murdered, were tortured and set alight in front of their families. Women were dragged away by Hindu mobs. They were dragged and gang raped by Hindu mobs, and then they were murdered by these people. Now, for the purpose of balance, many Hindus, when they realised what was going on, the horrors that were unfolding in front of their eyes, many Hindus, bless them, gave shelter to fleeing Sikh families who were running from the Gurdwaras, running from their homes. They were literally fleeing for their lives from these rampaging mobs. Many Hindu families took them in, and to their own risk, they hid them from these rampaging mobs. But mobs of tens of thousands of Hindus were encouraged by radio announcements, these awful cries, these battle cries by the Hindu politicians saying, get out there, murder Sikhs wherever you find them. And what unfolded over the next 3 or 4 days was an absolute affront to humanity. The events that have been documented and evidenced by many in the Sikh community, absolutely, it brings tears to the eyes when you read the stories of what unfolded over those few days. 40 years to the day, this must never be forgotten. It must be acknowledged publicly, this genocide that was unfolded. Many of the guilty behind that remain free. They have lived free lives ever since, which again is a travesty of justice. So it must never be forgotten. And the community must continue to push for official recognition of the Sikh genocide, this specific event, this one genocide that occurred against the community in India. Now, fortunately, what is going to happen over the next few days, and particularly from Friday onwards, is that this genocide will be marked by events around the world. Here in the UK, in Birmingham, there is going to be a vigil this Saturday. Hundreds of Sikhs and human rights supporters from across the UK will gather at Birmingham's Centenary Square for what they call #NeverForget1984. This is a vigil to mark the 40 years to the day since India's state facilitated this genocide. And of course, this event is one of similar events, dozens of events taking place globally. And it's estimated, as they say, at least 30,000 Sikhs were killed by the rampaging Hindu mobs in under a week. And across in Australia, we do know that likewise there are going to be many events organised. So I would say to our audience, wherever you are in your community, look out for your local events, go attend these events and keep that pressure on. Fortunately, of course, this sits hand in hand with what the community and the organisations within the community are up to, and they are organising to push politicians to recognise this genocide officially. And of course, we've reported here in the UK, the Sikh Federation and the various organisations here in the UK are pushing for the UK government to recognise the events of November 1984 as an official genocide. In the USA, James reported on the other day that various organisations, including the American Sikh Caucus Committee, Jakara Movement, NSAF, American Legal Defence and Education Fund, this is all in the US, United Sikhs, Sikh Coordination Committee East Coast, and the American Gurdwara Parbandak Committee, and of course the Sikh Coalition, that's quite a group, are all grateful to announce the introduction of a House resolution in the US Congress recognising the Sikh genocide of 1984. So a fantastic move in the US that officially, all being well, this will go through Congress, and it will form part of American law that the genocide of 1984 will be officially recognised as a genocide. And this, of course, sits hand in hand with the legislation going through of the Transnational Repression Act being pushed by a wonderful group of congressmen and congresswomen in the US. So hopefully, likewise in US law, this Transnational Repression Act will become into law, which will force every time that there is transnational repression by India, it will be officially recognised, it will be officially reported, and therefore the US government and all the various layers of governance will have no option but to act and react to that transnational repression. Yeah. So, wonderful progress, I would say. And again, this is a wonderful testament to the Sikh community and what they've been up to over the previous years, the last few years. The momentum has really been building. And one of the things that India has been very successful on in the past is this divide and conquer strategy. Well, the Sikh community has fought back magnificently. They are now uniting. There is a Sikh federation that's now uniting around the globe that started last month here in the UK, has spread to Canada now. And of course, the Sikh federation will unite in the US, Australia, New Zealand, and across Europe. And again, it's all about uniting the Sikh community. It's driving out this division. It's uniting the community, because this is the impact of unification. When the Sikh community unites, it's now having a massive impact globally. It's impacting government policy here in the UK, in the US and Canada. The voice isn't just being heard, it is now influencing policy, and in turn it's turning attention back on India, This is pushing the whole Khalistan movement massively. This is building that momentum behind the Khalistan movement. This is why Khalistan will happen, because this wave, this tsunami of weight and propaganda and information and evidence is all building to prove that India is in the wrong, the Sikh community is in the right. This is why the sovereign nation of Khalistan will happen, because the West will demand it. They want to see a beacon of democracy in the subcontinent. It's not India, it's going to be Khalistan, James.
I have to agree. And again, we're short on time, so I'll keep my comments short to that. But we're looking forward to a vacation in Khalistan, aren't we, Angus?
Indeed we are. We look forward to that day. So on that note, and of course we are way over time, let's rush on into our comments section. Lots of lovely comments. Thank you, as always, for all of your comments. Jack Frost. Now, yeah, you're absolutely right with this comment. I'm surprised the Indian bots haven't been posting on this comments section. They've been flooding Canadian media channels. Yeah, this is actually interesting. For some reason, we've been quite, I would say, relatively immune to the IT cells. We have been expecting a huge flood of anti-us and anti-Sikh comments, but actually we have been fairly immune to this. And I believe, and I'm not going to give too much away, but I do know that those behind the Satellite TV channel are very well connected with the US government, who in turn have channels open to the Indian government. And I think as I say, I can't say too much, but the Indian government have basically been warned away from us. And in turn, I think that information's cascaded down to the IT cells. Look, this is all about free speech. You attack the Satellite TV, you're going to start getting a backlash from very high levels in the US government and Western governments. In other words, let us do our thing. Let us speak. Let us give out our message. Because we are a democratic, we come from a democratic philosophy. We are only telling the truth. You start attacking us, you'll start incurring the high-level wrath of those you actually don't want to anger. So I suspect there's a little bit going on behind the scenes here. So very fortunate for us, James. We actually have a relatively clear run to put across an alternative narrative to the Indian narrative. And that's what we're all about. So.
Absolutely.
Sorry, James.
And if it pisses them off that we're speaking the truth, well, so be it.
Indeed. Now, the next comment from Balraj Bharat, this is a very concerning comment, actually. There are a few rumours of a few Khalistan favouring youngsters missing in Birmingham. That's Birmingham in the Midlands in the UK, which has a very large Sikh community. I have not heard this. I find this very worrying and very concerning. Yeah, give us more information. We'd like to report on this if this is the case. Yeah, it's we do know the RSS, Hindutva, are very active in the Midlands of the UK, because, of course, that's where a very strong and powerful pro-Khalistan movement exists. It wouldn't surprise me. Let us know more about that. Goggy Calon says, both of you are beautiful souls. Well, thank you. That's a very lovely thing to say. And yes, we do give voice to those who actually find it difficult to get their voice out to the public domain. That is a pleasure. And you say that most corrupt politicians of the world governing India, British left, even though Sikhs have been saviours of their race. So yeah, this comment is basically saying, and actually, and I'm going to lay blame on the British Empire for this to a large degree. I'm a big defender to some degree of the British Empire, because they did many good things. But one of the things that I don't like, that, particularly with India, is they basically handed India over to the Brahmins. They handed India over to the ruling elite of India, who have effectively continued this colonisation, and they betrayed the Sikhs, and they continue to betray the Sikh community here in the UK. And this is why I think I am very passionate about Khalistan, because I see the recompense that the British Empire, and certainly, let's say, modern Britain, owes to the Sikh community. Is we owe them a debt of honour for everything that they have done, the Sikh community have done for Britain since then. And I think that debt of honour can be repaid by fighting passionately for Khalistan, by giving Khalistan back to the Sikh community. And that's, I think, yeah, the comment here is, yeah, well, it's a very convoluted comment, which I think just summarises that it's right to stand for the truth, it's right to stand for everything that Khalistan stands for, and we must point the finger of guilt at India. So thank you for that comment. Right, James, we're going to rush on to Pretend Dylan. Oh, unfortunately, again, we just don't have the time to give this the justice it deserves. But Pretend Hill on this says, talks about Gurdas Man. Now, James, we talked a lot about Gurdas Man and the protests that even Satellite TV have been directly involved in. Preteamed Dillon
That's right.
says, Gurdas man is my mother's relative. He's not a bad guy. He's just trying to cool down tensions between Hindus and Sikhs to save Sikh lives from the Hindu attacks. He is pure Sikh. He understands the pain very deeply. Many Sikhs misinterpret him because he asked Sikhs to learn Hindi. In other words, this where he said that there should be just the one language of Hindi. So Preteamed Dillon is actually defending Gurdas man. And he says, to summarise his comment, is saying that Gurdas man actually is being misunderstood. He's actually standing up for the Sikh community. I don't know. This stands very much against what I would say the majority of our audience feel. But absolutely respect to you, Preteamed Dillon, that clearly he's a relative or at least connected to your family and that he has been deeply misunderstood. Maybe that is the case, actually. I would say he's probably going about it the wrong way. And I was cynically saying I think he's probably more interested in selling tickets to his events across North America. But ultimately, maybe his feelings are genuine. Maybe he does feel that he's trying to do his best for the Sikh community. Let us know, audience, members of our audience, what you think about this. Please read this comment. Maybe there is a genuine feeling that Gurdas man is actually standing up for the Sikh community. He's just going about it in his own way that's been deeply misinterpreted, James. Maybe that's the case.
Maybe that's the case, and I would go even further to say that if he wants to have a discussion with me or with both Angus and I, we'd love to have him on the show and actually dedicate a large amount of time for him to explain himself and to maybe get to the bottom of it and to move that forward, Angus.
Absolutely. If he wants to get in touch, you know where to get in touch, guys. Give us a call or send us an email. We'll be delighted to have a discussion with you. 1S1N2. This is referring to this article that went out by the the major mainstream press agencies that again was fed to all the mainstream news outlets around the world about India's transnational oppression and the whole big story when it exploded a week or so ago. And there were a few inaccuracies in that article. And 1S1N2 refers to, for example, talking about Bhindranwale, saying he was responsible for a violent movement. Of course, it was incorrect. He wasn't responsible for a violent movement. And 1S1N2 goes on about the article spreading lies that have been spread, etc., etc. And there were some inaccuracies. Now, what I would say, actually, is yes, absolutely. And we did point out some of those inaccuracies when we reported that news article. Now, what you have to remember is that whoever wrote that article was not a Sikh. It was somebody completely impartial to this whole story, to the whole issue. All they'd done is they'd done whatever research they could, and they drew from all these various resources. And don't forget, a lot of those resources were written by the RSS. So, of course, there were going to be inaccuracies in that. Now, so what I would say is don't shoot the messenger. Yes, they got some parts of that article wrong. And it's very important that people like us point out those things. But there was a lot of very, very good, powerful information in that article that went to all these mainstream news broadcasters. What was important is that the whole message was sent out, that the awareness was raised. Yeah, not all of it was right, not all of it was perfect, but the big point was that it reached the mainstream media. Now, afterwards, we can then argue about the detail. We can correct things. We can go to the mainstream media and say, look, actually, that bit of the story was wrong. That's fine. But the important thing was the big story reached the mainstream media. So all those people out in the West who didn't know anything about these issues, suddenly they're now understanding what these issues are. Now, Bhindranwale, unfortunately, may have been painted as a militant at the time. Of course, we know he wasn't a militant. He was fighting for his basic human rights. But that can be corrected afterwards. The point is the whole story, that attack on the Golden Temple in 1984 was brought to the world's attention. And what's happened since was brought to the world's attention. Then we can start educating the world about actually the truth about Bhindranwale, etc., etc. So a good point. But let's, the English phrase is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. In other words, look, let's get the big message out there first, and then we'll worry about the details. But thank you for pointing that out. And then our final section of, I've got two more to get through, so again, we're way over time, James. SSK Trucking says, this episode is a big nail in India's coffin. British have been too good to them. Give them the whole of India. It was never one country. This comes back to what I was referring to earlier. The British were wrong when they handed India back to India in the way they did it. They basically handed it to the Brahmins. we don't want our episode, James, to be a nail in India's coffin. As I keep saying, and I will keep reiterating, we love India, we love India's culture, we love its people. What we don't like is the RSS and Hindutva. They're the people we are holding to account, not the people of India. So I don't want it to be a nail in India's coffin. I want it to be a nail in Hindutva's coffin. There's a clear distinction I want to make there. Because, as I say, well, James and I would love to go visit India. At the moment, I don't feel safely we can do so. But one day I hope to visit India. Again, I have actually been there before and I love the place. But yeah, back to the British point. I think the British betrayed the Sikhs, as I've constantly said, and they handed India over to the Brahmins, which did India no favour. It did India's Hindus no favour. And it meant the caste system perpetuated. That was the problem. So, but you're absolutely right, SSK Trucking. Thank you for the comment. James, I don't think you got anything on that one.
No, I think that you hit it on the head there, Angus.
Harjit says about the BRICS organisations, and we did actually raise this point at the time, and you're absolutely right. If you notice one thing about the BRICS organisations, and this is the organisation that India wants to be part of and be a big member of, they're all basically totalitarian regimes. There's not an ounce of democracy in any one of them. If you look at China, Russia, Turkey, questionable democracy, Iran, all these countries, Saudi Arabia, all these countries, they're not democracies. Likewise, India, it claims it's a democracy. Don't you think it's a bit strange that India wants to be part of the BRICS organisations? Again, I found that a bit anomalous, James.
Exactly, and we could do a whole show just on the BRICS and the contradictions there, but we'll leave that for another day, Angus.
Indeed. And Gurinder, I think, drives the point home. Imprisoning democratically elected MPs, Amritpal Singh. Yeah, democracies don't do that. So once again, we have to point the finger of guilt at the Indian government. And right, Akar Singh Gill says, we're so used to mass media ignoring Sikh causes and Gator media, demonising Sikhs. Your podcast give a balanced viewpoint. Thank you, James, for your honest maturity and rational analysis. James, I don't think I've ever been called mature and rational before, but what a lovely compliment.
I'll leave that one because we could sit here and make jokes for the next hour. But hey, we're mature, so let's behave ourselves.
Well, I suppose age-wise, we're certainly mature. But thank you for that comment. And what it's all about is it is about balance. We do like to give the alternative narrative and basically the truth. That now, and this actually brings me on to my next comment. Neutrality 456. Thank you from Delhi. I didn't know we had anybody in Delhi watching us. If you are in Delhi, a huge hello and welcome to you. Thank you for watching from Delhi. We do know we have watchers in our audience from Punjab. How wonderful to know that there are people in Delhi itself who are watching us. So thank you for letting us know. Welcome to the show. Thank you for your comment. I guess you are on a VPN. I guess you're on a VPN watching us. Tell all your friends, tell everybody around, get on VPNs, watch us, or change your phone settings. I think it is, James, that you can watch us. Change your phone settings to the US or somewhere, which allows you access to the show, James.
I'm a little too mature to be changing my phone settings because I'm getting old. I can't remember how to change them back.
Yeah, we'll never get it back. Exactly. I think tech and age don't really sit hand in hand very well. And the Bajat says, love both you guys. Well, we love you and your comments. Thank you. You're doing great service to the Sikh nation. Thanks a lot for telling the truth. Well, that's why we're here. We are here to tell the truth. And Nirmal Singh says the same. You taught the truth and nothing but the truth. That is why we're here. We do our best to bring you the alternative narrative. Both of you will have to live in Khalistan. We love Trudeau and you, and we stand up for justice, irrespective of race, religion and colours. Khalistan Zindabad, love Australia. And Arwinder Singh Gurtra signs off with, I want Khalistan in Punjab, James. I think that says it all, does it not?
Well stated. Very well stated.
Indeed, put those comments up because actually those comments really just bring together and summarise so many very, very similar comments, very complimentary comments from many of you, which, as I say, on a regular basis, thank you. It really does mean an awful lot. We do read every single comment. They do mean an awful lot to James and I. It keeps us going because we do work extremely hard at this show. We work every hour that God sends to bring you the truth and this alternative narrative. And your support, your comments that come in by the hundreds, they they mean an awful lot to us. It means we're working in the right direction. And it also means Khalistan Zindabad. And as you say, Arwinder, Khalistan in Punjab, we will get there. The momentum is building and it's going to happen. And with the support of all of us in the community, we're going to get there. We're going to get it over the line. But unfortunately, we must draw perspectives to a very tardy close once again. But thank you for watching. Don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Tell us anything that you'd like us to report on. Send us your educational comments. Send us your critics. There's a few critics who do get through here who send us some wonderfully critical comments and a counter narrative. It's always, we're here for free speech. So if you don't agree with us, let us know and explain to us why, and we will be delighted to talk about that in our comment section as always. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellotetv.com. Let us know something, anything that you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, very rushedly towards the end of the show, it is a goodbye from me and it is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.